Starting off, we're going to be presenting a case study in tech-driven transformation from folks at the City of Hope. And I'm going to be facilitating. I'm Gordon Harris. I am the co-director of the Tumor Imaging Metrics Core for the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center, a mouthful. And I am also co-founder and chief science officer for Yunu. Introduce the rest of our panel. Liz?
I'm Liz Curry. I'm our Director of Customer Success. I oversee our implementations. My background's in medical imaging and clinical research, and I managed the Yunu software at Yale prior to coming over to Yunu.
And hi, everyone. My name is Matt Bush. I'm the Executive Director for Clinical Trials Technology and Data Solutions at City of Hope. My team runs the various administrative systems at City of Hope supporting clinical research, and we were the owners and implementers of Yunu.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Hammond. I am the Vice President for Quality and Regulatory Oversight at City of Hope. I'm having the pleasure of working very closely with Matt and Heather, who will introduce herself. But our team is essentially responsible for quality and regulatory oversight. As you can imagine, I think this really does dovetail very nicely in with some of our compliance initiatives and quality initiatives.
Hello, I'm Heather Crow. I'm the Director of Clinical Research for our Arizona campuses, and I have been working very closely with Matt and Amanda and Liz for our migration process of Yunu into our systems.
And we're going to be talking about how City of Hope transformed their clinical trials imaging workflows and compliance and quality across their entire national network. Just for a little bit of background, many of you may have these issues if you're involved in imaging and clinical trials, but there are a lot of challenges in that sites are given these large protocols that have complex criteria and they have different requirements for every clinical trial. And then you have to get the imaging done for each patient on that trial in time to make a decision about whether the patient meets the enrollment for the trial and for each subsequent time point. And so getting the radiologist to do those imaging assessments has a lot of complexity because each trial has different requirements and the radiologists don't necessarily have all the information about what's required and they don't necessarily have the tools to make sure that it's done correctly. And you end up with a lot of delays. You end up with a lot of patients showing up for office visits without the results, or the results are done incorrectly. We've found, looking at the onboarding at different NCI comprehensive cancer centers, 3 cancer centers over the years have reported these results at this meeting with 25 to 50% error rates in nonconformance with the imaging criteria. So anybody who's involved in imaging, that's probably not a surprise. It's probably more of a surprise that they get it right half the time if you know how complicated all the things behind the scenes are. So with that as the backdrop of the challenges, we're going to have the folks from City of Hope who have just gone through a transformation from working on a paper-based system into a electronic way of managing and making sure that the imaging assessments follow all the criteria. So just turning it over to the folks from City of Hope, maybe just talk a little bit about the background of what the issues that you were seeing before were in terms of, how was it done? What were the challenges you were seeing? What drove you to seek a way to address those issues?
Yeah. So for just some quick background, kind of scale and scope and how we approach all of this. So we have at any time about 400 to 450 active treatment trials at one point. We have our main campus in Duarte, but then we have 8 research hubs in the Southern California area. And we also have 3 sites, one in Chicago, one in Atlantic, and one in Phoenix, all conducting treatment trials. So we really wanted a platform that could serve not just the Southern California area, but would work across our entire network. And that was one of the big things that we went about doing this, is we needed something to have a central single source of truth for all of our imaging assessments. And that really wasn't in place before. So yeah, I think challenges, Amanda, anything you want me to start with? Or
I would just add challenges. I don't think I'm going to be saying anything that other institutions at some point have experienced, but, paper-based TMFs, paper-based anything today, especially, during COVID, it was sort of a bit of a challenge. But, there was a lot of back and forth between the PIs and the radiologists, and tracking all of that with a paper system it causes a lot of delays. I think also for us, as we were looking at what are our staffing needs, how can we help support our radiology team, it was a very manual tracking process process that we had. So now I would say with this system, we're able to pull down reports on volume metrics with much more facility and ease and a lot greater, or I would say more confidence in the data that we're pulling. And I think that's positioned certainly our radiology team to request necessary resources to help support them. And then I would also say, just kind of tracking the aging pieces. As Matt said, we've got multiple institutions. It was kind of the squeaky wheel gets the oil, which is not good. We want everything to kind of come through in a timely fashion. So I think this kind of gives us a little bit more visibility into the aging reports. Again, it's all about just that transparency. I would say that's what we were really lacking before.
I think the other thing I would add as well, we were fortunate in that at the time we were starting our implementation, we had a new chair of radiology join the organization. So she's been extremely supportive of this project and really came in and saw this as an opportunity to really change the way the operations work. So her main mission was coming in focusing on the clinical aspects of radiology and making sure we were strong clinically, which means as part of this implementation, we've ended up outsourcing pretty much all of our reads through the universe as part of our implementation to make sure radiology and the new chair had time to get settled, get set up, have a strong clinic presence. And now we're going to be working with them now that we're almost through our last disease teams, moving everything back in-house. Probably won't do everything at once. It's going to be most likely a phased roll-in, but I think that was another component of the project that I think we really benefited from was having outside radiologists to be able to help with what is a very large volume, as well as doing implementation at the same time. Yeah, and the change management that goes along with that as well, for sure.
Yeah, maybe talk a little bit about the change management. How did you take this very large cohort of trials? What was the process to get it on? Because it obviously can't just happen immediately. Talk about.
So we have 17 disease and modality teams, and we took a disease team by disease team implementation approach. So we started with our GU team, which is probably one of our larger teams. They're pretty sophisticated and also very well staffed compared to some of our other teams at the time. And also our AD for clinical research is the lead of the GU team. So we had a really strong physician partner to start off this project. And he'd been someone who'd been advocating for a change in process for a while. So I think having that physician support up front and being able to demonstrate success with a very large and also very heavy early phase team, I think paid some dividends. And we really we took lessons learned from that initial disease team and kind of applied that as we started looking at migration for some of the other teams moving forward. So we started with GU, moved into GI, and then we kind of grouped the remaining teams mostly by our disease team managers. So like our breast and gyne teams went together. And I think the most complex groups by far were our hematology groups. I think lymphoma in particular is our largest disease team. And the complexity with those protocols, the amount of IATs we had in that space, and just the amount of assessments that are requested on a regular basis, I think that group in particular is one that we're really going to see benefit from having a central single source and process for getting assessments in, having them be processed. And the transparency, like Amanda spoke to, is already significantly improved from a paper-based email process that was basically tracked via Excel spreadsheets. So we're already feeling much more comfortable with what the regular volume is, be able to report on that, track that. And I think also the component with managing urgent requests, because they do happen, patients coming in last minute, you need to get the assessments done. Have a clearly delineated process to do that is another benefit that we're seeing. But the disease team by disease team process works for us because that's how we're structured. We would go to each individual disease team, do a presentation, introduce the project, what we're doing, why we're doing, what's the approach, what's the benefits, and that seemed to resonate with most of our physicians as far as we're doing that.
And maybe Heather and Liz, if you could talk a little bit, because you did most of the actual implementation and migration, just how that process works together between the two of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we work hand in hand, really on a cell phone daily call basis sometimes, which is fantastic. We get tons of support. But as Matt alluded to, we did, disease team by disease team, and we were able to morph our kind of approach for each disease team. What worked for GU didn't necessarily work for GI, that didn't work for lymphoma, and just being able to retain that flexibility to say, okay, this is what this disease group needs. this is the difference in disease assessments. And if any of us didn't know, we could lean on Liz and her team at Yunu to say, what is the best approach for this? Doesn't seem to be working in the exact same way, and got lots of really close communication and feedback. And then our coordinators and our site level staff had tons and tons of support. We met with them frequently of, here's what I need for this migration to happen. Here's how it went with our last group. Here's some lessons learned, but we want your feedback too, because at the end of the day, they're the ones using the product. They're the ones producing the TMFs that we need to be able to migrate into the system. And then they're also seeing the change in the tumor measurement forms within the platform itself, and how streamlined and everything looks the same. Even if the criteria is different, the system designs it to be very easy, user-friendly. It's a fantastic system. We've gotten tons of great feedback from our end users as well.
Liz, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would say the rollout depends on the customer. If you're a customer who has 50 active trials or so, usually going all disease teams at once, if you're open to it and have that level of engagement, tends to be successful as well. A customer the size of City of Hope, that would be a lot to undertake on both ends, especially for migrating the data in the system, which we'll talk about. So the phased out disease team by disease team approach gives you a lot more control. It gives you a lot more engagement from the coordinators, and proved to be a very successful approach for you guys.
Yeah, Liz, that's a really good point to raise, because just not to give the impression that, City of Hope is obviously one of the top 5 cancer centers and has a huge clinical trials program. Maybe talk a little bit about just the scalability, like how small a site, how large a site do you work with?
We have some sites we're currently doing 12 active onboardings right now. I would say the smallest site that we have is about 12 to 15 active trials that we were able to get live within a couple weeks, because we were able to do all disease teams at once and all trials at once. And that was just a faster onboarding, of course. A customer like City of Hope that has 600 plus trials will take a little bit more time, and you'll want that more phased out approach so you have a little bit more control over the management of it.
And maybe from the City of Hope folks, since you have a pretty broad range of trials and geographic locations, talk a little bit about how something like this was impacting, how are you managing across all those sites, and how has this, impacted that?
I think so we're on a single instance of Epic across all of our sites. So that is definitely a benefit to us. We have a one PAC system for our Southern California sites and a separate PAC system for our Phoenix, Atlanta, Chicago. So the nice thing about this is we can have those 2 separate systems, but still be able to pull down images for assessment within the system. Within Southern California, at least, it was always our central radiology team in Duarte that had been doing the assessments. So this just kind of made it so that clear intake and clear completion, I think, was a big benefit for our SoCal sites, because sometimes the ones outside of our main site in Duarte, there are sometimes mixed messages about process. So this really helped to, like I said, single intake, I think, was one of the biggest benefits for the non-main site at our Duarte campus.
And Amanda, from a regulatory and quality and auditing perspective, how has this impacted your daily life there?
Well, certainly from our monitoring reports, we're finding things are getting done in a much more timely fashion. Less urgency, less delays in some of the treatment visits, if that's what's needed, if these measurements are not available. So we're happier with sort of the compliance aspect of this. It's something we do monitor. We work very closely with our compliance teams as well. And it's something that we have decided we're going to continue to measure as far as our portfolio health from a quality perspective.
And, we want this to be open for questions and interactivity. So if anybody does have any questions, we do have microphones around if anybody has anything they want to ask.
Thank you. You talked about 3 therapeutic areas that you had implemented this into. Have you implemented it into all areas or just those 3?
Yes. So we only have 3 disease teams left. So we've done it for all. We're finishing up with our theranostics team. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, I think we've got head and neck left and melanoma. Thank you. So outside of those 3, we've done it for the other 14 disease teams.
Yeah. And expected to be completed next month, right?
I think the next few weeks, if everything goes according to the plan.
Any other questions?
Could you talk a little bit more about how you outsource the radiology reads and then how you're going to bring that back?
So the Yunu team, we have a set of readers that we provide based off of their contracted readers within Yunu who are very well experienced in clinical trials and all response criteria and all modalities, which is a tricky part of the site radiology component is they're broken out by body read, neuro read. They're not usually able to do all modalities or all response criteria. So the group of readers that we have are trained on all response criteria by us. They're able to do all types of imaging, which helps prevent the limiting aspect of doing a site read. So we have a group of readers that are trained by us, work with us, that we then add to your site and add to your site workflow. They log in directly and then are able to manage a work list and orders assigned to that work list and do cases directly. Technically, the minimum is 4 hours, but some of them do them within an hour or so if necessary. And at the latest that you will get a read is 3 business days. So if you are commonly seeing, which we hear a lot of, that you're not getting your reads done for, I've heard some honestly 6+ weeks, this dramatically improves your turnaround times and your ability to actually have these results available for the patient visit. So that's the setup. They just log in directly to your instance that we set up for you. There's no communication that you need to manage. They have a work list designed within your system and orders get sent directly there. There's no outside communication that you need to manage. And then they're done typically within 3 business days, if not much sooner than that.
Yeah, I think the nice thing within Yunu is the queue setup where we can clearly see where it is and who it's with. And it's been a pretty seamless of doing it outsourced versus insourced. It really, from an end user standpoint, it's been pretty transparent.
You know, they made a decision to outsource them, as Matt was saying, to give them some breathing room to kind of get caught up on their clinical work, which was also behind. And we basically just flipped a switch on one day and outsourced their entire portfolio of 300 plus reads per month to a combination of Mass General, the ACR Imaging Core Lab, and another private radiology group in California, actually 2 private radiology groups now. And then when their radiologists are ready, we can just flip it back to them. And, you know, at the Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center, for example, we have for the last 10 years been reading all the cases for the Massey Cancer Center at VCU. Any Massey folks here? Nobody? And then UW, when we were short-staffed last summer, we had 3 of our image analysts out on maternity and medical leave. And Fred Hutch Core Lab, using our software, would do our preliminary assessments on some of our cases to help give us some breathing room. And then when they have radiologists who are out at conferences or on vacation, our radiologists will overread for their cases. So it's really, when Liz was talking about the universe and Matt was talking about the universe of YUNU universe, we call it that. But that's our collaborative platform that lets people work together, share the load when people need help. You can do all the reads in-house. You can outsource all the reads. You can have a hybrid approach model.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to add, whether it's outsourced to the universe or just done internally, is that the system auto prioritizes your needs. So if you have patients who come in that need their scans for eligibility in same day, the system, you put in the due date, it will automatically reprioritize and it will flag them as urgent. So that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback we had from our coordinating staff is, I have an urgent one. How do I get an urgent one through? Who do I need to email? What do I need to do? Because in our historical manual platform, it was very much an email communication through a radiology department and escalations. So this platform really takes that away because the system is designed to, I place the due date, it auto prioritizes within those work queues and automatically flags. So the radiologist team knows that, okay, this is the next one on my queue. It's not the squeaky wheel kind of thing that I really need this. Can you get it done? It's very transparent in where my order is in the process. And from an end user perspective, the coordinator can go in and look at their order and see exactly where it's at. So if it's in an in-process status, for example, they know that somebody has picked it up and they're starting the read. If it's in review status, they know that it's going to a radiologist and nearly complete, so they can ping on those in real time, but they don't need to necessarily have that anxiety of, is it going to be done in time? Will my patient meet their eligibility criteria in the window? Because they can see very transparently right within the system.
And one question people might be wondering is, if you have a model where you can have different readers and change between them, how do you maintain quality and consistency? And that's done through the software itself. So the software will automatically pull up the prior with the new time point and automatically register them and bring you to the first lesion. it'll select the correct series and bring it up in that view side by side. So it shows you where that lesion is. It brings you to the same point on the new one. You can just adjust a little bit up and down to make sure you got the best slice and make that measurement and click on the next lesion. It'll take you to that. And then it won't let you do anything that doesn't meet the specifics of the criteria. So every trial has a different criteria in clinical trials. There's 30 main criteria. There's multiple criteria trials. There's modifications on all the trials. That gets entered when you start a trial in the system, and the viewer guides the radiologist to make sure they follow that criteria, and it'll give them error messages if they don't, and it won't let them save it if it's incorrect, and it won't let them sign the wrong response. It does all the calculations. It knows whether it's supposed to be short axis or long axis. All of that is handled by the software, so it makes it much less dependent on user variability. Any other questions from the...
I just wondered if you could talk about your billing model. Are you using this for all different types of studies or just industry-sponsored studies, and how is that working?
Yeah, so we are using it for our entire portfolio. We are updating, or just in general, we're going through some process changes with our billing approach. We're getting a standard pricing policy in place, and part of that includes standard pricing for assessments. And so we are going to be building into our clinical trial budgets a component to cover this out. If we continue to outsource, the outsourcing costs, so it's going to be fully budgeted and covered through those industry sponsors. Still finalizing the exact details on that, but that is the long-term plan, is we want this fully covered in those agreements. That, I think, is still TBD. I don't know if you know more. Yeah, our VP of budgeting and contracting is working through that process. I don't know the exact details yet.
Yeah, I can probably take that one because I've been doing this for 20 years at DFHCC, and I run a core that has to be revenue neutral. So the way that we handle it, and at our core, we pay the exact same Yunu fees that they do. Jeff is our CEO, and he doesn't even give me a discount. So we have a fee schedule for doing our clinical trials that varies based on the complexity of the trial. And we also have different fee schedule for industry-sponsored versus IIT trials and NCI trials. So we charge a little more on the industry side, and that helps subsidize the IIT trials so that I can keep my core balanced. And that includes the Yunu fees and everything. Good question. Any other questions? Oh, Yunu also tracks all the billing in the system too. So it'll give you a monthly report, every trial, how many time points, what the fees are, what to pay the radiologist. But, it handles all that too. Any other questions?
Does it actually give the actual report, or it's just the RECIST or NANO or whatever criteria we are using?
When you say the actual report, do you mean the clinical trial report, or do you mean a clinical readout?
Clinical readout.
No, the site will do their own. That we don't get involved in the clinical read. So the site radiologists will do that in their usual work. But what they do love about this is you can separate out the clinical trial read from the clinical report, so it doesn't disrupt the radiologist's clinical day. So radiologists are under a lot of pressure to keep their RVUs up, and they're reading qualitatively, about a scan every 7 minutes or so. And then a clinical trials imaging assessment comes along where somebody says, please do a Lugano with these modifications and give me these on this thing. And they have to figure out what was done prior and where was this. And the measurements themselves don't take that long. So a lot of people say, oh, can't you just fix it with AI? Well, AI might take marking a lesion from 3 seconds to 1 second. That's not what takes radiologists' time. What takes radiologists' time is figuring out what the criteria is, figuring out what the protocol is, getting the right series, loading them up side by side, finding what lesion it was. Somebody else measured it before. What did they do? Am I measuring the same lesion? Has it changed? What's the calculation? What do I have to do? So, and then having to deal with all the back and forth with the study teams, because they're saying, well, I don't like what you measured. Well, what do you do? The system handles all of that. It cuts about 80% of the study staff time and about 50% of the radiologist time. So that just makes it hugely efficient. Any other questions from the...
I was just going to add to that, just on the reports that we get, the tumor measurement forms, once completed, we also have the integration with Florence. So they do land in Florence, which, just to address, I think, the earlier question about compliance, what's nice is we spent a lot of time, where's the TMF, where's this? I mean, it's automatically in Florence now, which is a nice benefit for us.
Yeah, so to the question about the reports, so the reports can be used as the source documents for the clinical trial, and everything is available within the system for monitors and auditing. And so you don't have to do any prepping for auditing. Basically, what the clinical trials folks are used to getting is a number in a form that's copied from something else manually, and they're auditing, trying to see, did what go into that form come from what was in that sheet? But that has no tie back to the original data. So you have no way of confirming whether what's measured on the image is what's in that form, was what's copied into that EDC. So they have no way of even knowing what the error rate is on non-protocol compliance. So when we go into sites, that's why we're able to see a 25 to 50% non-conformance rate, because we can actually track every measurement, every annotation on every lesion, on every time point, on every patient, on every trial at every site in our platform. And you can go back and hover over it and see it and confirm that's it. So it makes the auditing process completely audit ready. You don't have to do any preparing for audits. And the auditors and monitors love it. We've had people come up to us, tell us how much they appreciate, working at sites that have that. 2 questions there. I don't know who was first. Looked like a tie. Jump ball. Okay, there you go.
Okay. Kind of building off of that. So a lot of sponsors want us to upload de-identified scans into their systems. So does this take the place of that work? Have sponsors accepted this instead?
So we do have a workflow for doing de-identification for central review. A lot of sites have told us that's the bane of their existence. So we built a workflow for that too. So it makes that process more organized and streamlined, and you can set up a trial with the rules. And then every time you put a patient on that, it'll know what the de-identification rules are. Every time you load a patient on, then when you bring it back, it'll know what the study ID for that patient is. So it takes a lot of the manual work out of that as well. And then you can send a link for them to download it themselves rather than having to go through all the different, we've had sites that told us they have dozens of different uploaders for all the different trials that they're running, and it's just impossible to manage manually. So we do have workflows for that as well.
My question is just if I'm seeing a patient in clinic and I have a question about their resist read, or can I speak to a radiologist in real time?
Great question. Liz, do you want to take that one about the re-review request process?
So not typically, but if you especially outsource your reads, you have them in time for the patient visit. If there are any questions prior to that visit, you can be in touch with the radiologist. You would reach out to who is managing the service at your site, and they'll be able to put you in direct contact with the radiologist. Our current radiologist team is very responsive. You can email them right away, or you have their cell phone numbers as well. And then if there were any changes that you wanted to make to the cycle visit data, if you didn't agree that it was a PD lesion and you thought it was stable disease clinically, they are able to just jump right into the system and make that change so it's reflected in the data prior to the patient visit.
And can you talk a little bit about the re-review request process?
So that's the re-review request process.
But how do they? Yep. What do they have to do to get it?
You just have to press a button in the process, and on the cycle visit itself in the system, it's a formal re-review button. It goes directly to the person who's managing the service at your site and the radiologist, and they're able to unlock the scan and make any changes directly there.
You just click the re-review button when you're looking at the results, and you say what your issue is and your question is. It could be, I think you measured a lesion that I think was a bowel fold and shouldn't have been counted as a target, or you measured a lesion that had been previously treated. Can you exclude that one? Or, it's 21%. Are you sure it's not 19%? The patient's doing well. Or there's a tiny little thing you marked as a new lesion. Can you, put it as equivocal and follow it on all those kinds of things? You just click a button, you put a comment, it goes back, and they can adjust it.
So do your docs then interface with this platform, or it's mostly the clinical research staff?
No, that's a good question. So when we started the implementation process, we reached out to our disease team leaders and say, hey, we're implementing this tool. What are your thoughts? Is this something you're going to actually want to go into and log into and interact with? And surprisingly, they said no.
No, that's what we're going to say too.
And maybe not surprisingly. It depends on who you ask. But they said, no, we don't want another system we have to log into.
Yeah.
We have no interest of having to, it's all linked up through single sign-on, so it's still your credentials, but they just didn't want another platform they will have to go into, look, and manage. So we kept our process where PI or investigator sign-off previously was happening in Florence. It's still happening in Florence. We have gotten outreach now that we're fully live. A couple of the early, especially in GI, some of those physicians have some interest of going in and actually be able to see the platform. So we may pilot with a couple of the more sophisticated ones, but the strong feedback was, nope, don't want to go into another system. And okay, that's fine with us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've had PIs who have said, it would be great if I could get a waterfall plot of my trial, and we said, well, we have that in our system. We showed it to them, like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. So like a lot of the times the investigators have things that if they knew about in the system, they would want to go in and use. But all the data is there. If you ever want to check on anything, you can go in. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you're wondering about something about a patient, you can just go and look at it. I mean, it's a web-based platform. You can access it from anywhere. Any other questions? So maybe some closing thoughts, just wrapping up sort of, key takeaways from your experience. What would you recommend to sites that are struggling with their imaging? Any lessons learned, anything you guys want to share with the remaining time we have?
I would just say I wish we had done this sooner, partly because of the sheer volume, and it really has made things so much easier for our staff. And I think during these periods where we're all looking for ways to be so much more efficient while maintaining, good quality, I think this has definitely benefited our organization. And I think through the implementation, one of the nice things, we've always had a nice relationship with radiology, but it's even stronger. I think there was a lot of sort of eye-opening aspects to kind of a partnership as we implemented this. So that was really nice. The other thing I would say is with any migration into any platform, a certain level of patience is needed, especially since there's always that kind of QC component that naturally happens with a data migration. And I do have to say, I think our investigators, I think it helped make them a little bit more engaged as they were sort of trying to understand, is this something from before? Why is it different now? Didn't happen very often, but I would just say, just move forward with a certain amount of patience. You're always going to uncover things that, that's a little unexpected, but it's good that you're addressing it, in the moment.
Yeah. So from a migration perspective, I think it's just really important to keep in mind it's a big undertaking. It's a big ask from your coordinators. It's a big ask from the PIs, the staff. Everywhere. Everyone is involved. So just really having a point person designated has been really helpful that can help integrate, migrate, be involved with all aspects of this, with the radiology team, with the physicians, with the coordinators, and especially with the coordinators, because we needed them to give us information about all of their legacy tumor measurement forms, all of the paper-based, and making sure they were all here and they're present and they're readable and meet all the needs that we need to migrate. So having someone that's really able to kind of man that or woman that and move it forward through the process is really helpful in engaging all of those coordinators early on. So they're not surprised by what we're asking. And we know that it's a big undertaking. So giving them enough time to be able to gather the information that's needed to effectively migrate the data into the system so they can see the benefits once it's in there.
And just one final thing to add that City of Hope has done a really great job of is they know who to reach out to. So Heather has been driving this whole project. If I have an IT question, she and Matt can point me to the right person to resolve an IT issue right away during an implementation process. And having your central person be somebody who knows your organizational chart and knows who to reach out to specific items just significantly improves your rollout and getting the right people involved from the beginning to have a piece of planning that rollout altogether.
And Liz, maybe you can talk a little bit also about your team and the experience of your team and how we work with sites from the beginning and beyond the implementation over time.
So our customer success team is built up of 4 former users of the system. So I manage the service at Yale. Another member of our team managed the service at Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center and did imaging assessments. Another managed it at University of Washington. And then we just brought another person on board who was a coordinator at University of Washington as well. And we are part of the user design. So the entire workflow within the system is built off of our experience and our constant work and collaboration with our customers about what do you actually need. Not just a product that we install, train you on, and then leave, but we're with you as customer support throughout the entire process. In implementation, we have bi-weekly and sometimes even weekly sessions. We're available by phone. We want to make sure this actually works for you. It's not just a software that you install, we leave, and then it just sits there. We want to make sure that everybody's involved to make sure this implementation is actually successful. And having a customer success team who's built up of former users who actually understand your pain points and the people who are actually doing the work, what is involved in that day-to-day, we feel like has helped actually the product grow and that customer success relationship be successful.
Matt, you have any thoughts or to add? You're thought it out?
No, I don't think anything. I think I would echo what Heather said. I think one of the biggest lessons learned during implementation, we originally planned to do this leveraging our disease team managers to be kind of the point person as we went disease team by disease team, but we quickly learned busy clinic load, busy portfolios, and it just wasn't working and we weren't making the right amount of traction. So that's when Heather joined the team and kind of took that point position and really helped shepherd these things through. I wish we'd done that from the start. We'd probably be done by no, we would be done by now had we done that. But I think that the net result was very positive.
And any other questions or thoughts from the room? Anybody here at a site that uses the software, or everybody at sites that are?
I used to sit in a radiologist's office for hours trying to get tumor measurements. It was painful. This is a blessing. Truly.
Any other questions or thoughts? Anybody? Thank you all for coming. It was a very enjoyable and informative session. I appreciate all the folks on the panel. Thank you, everybody.